Let's get started here with the Panther-Lair Show on a Wednesday night. It's September 28th, 2022, and we're getting together here for a live chat about Pitt sports. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know that website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. You know what I always say? It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. You hear me say this all the time, and if you're tired of hearing me say this, you should just subscribe to the website, and then we don't have to tell you anymore, because you would already know. And you'd be the one telling other people, hey, you need to check out Panther-Lair.com. It's the best place for Pitt sports news, football and basketball, recruiting. You'd be like, listen, man, I can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and they have message boards where I can interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. These are the things you would be saying to other people if you just subscribe to Panther-Lair.com. And then you'd save me a lot of time. We could jump into the Pitt conversation a lot sooner. We could talk about Pitt stuff a lot more. If you would just subscribe, then I could spend all my time talking about all these stats and data and information I have written down instead of trying to sell you on Panther-Lair.com the whole time. And if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, then I wouldn't have to tell you about that either. There's an easy solution here, folks. Hit the like button on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then go check out Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, because all the things we do here on YouTube, and we've been doing a lot, it all comes from the website. You know what I mean? Like there isn't much that shows up on this YouTube channel or in these YouTube videos that doesn't have some origin on Panther-Lair.com. If I come up with a really great stat, it's going to be on Panther-Lair.com before it shows up on the YouTube videos. So go to the website, sign up there, and then subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hit the like button, do all those things, and you would really make my day if you did it. Of course, I'm sure you've been checking out the morning Pitt videos this week. Monday through Friday, we release a new one every morning. Just a little bit of Pitt talk to get you started for the day. Nothing gets you going in the morning like the morning Pitt. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, half hour, however long it takes. And I think today's video, we talked for about 25 minutes about Pitt basketball and Jeff Capel. Tomorrow, we'll probably talk for closer to like a half an hour. Whatever it takes to talk about the topics of the day. And there doesn't necessarily need to be any breaking news to discuss. We'll find things to talk about. Pitt is in the middle. I mean, they're a third of the way through the 2022 football season. The basketball team just started practicing their first official practices of the year. They got 4 fall sports teams ranked right now. There's recruiting stuff going on. There's always something to talk about in Pitt sports and to talk about on this, on the Morning Pitt Show. And we only do it Monday through Friday. It's not like I'm trying to fill 7 days. Let's not get ridiculous here. It's only 5 days a week. And then, of course, we have our live shows here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Wednesday night, the Panther-Lair Show, which is this right here, every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. And then after the games, we have our Panther-Lair post-game show. We'll do it every Saturday after the games, just to talk about what we saw. And never really know what time those shows are going to start. Might start soon after the end of the game. If it's a road game and we watch it here from the Panther-Lair.com offices in the South Hills, then we'll go live shortly after the game ends. If it's a home game or we're at Acrisure Stadium, you got to wait till we get done with all the work there, post-game press conferences and whatnot, and come home from the game, then it's going to be a little bit later. So this game against Georgia Tech on Saturday, it's an 8 o'clock kickoff. I have no idea what time we're going to start, but we are going to do a live show. It'll be 1:30 in the morning or something like that, which is going to be awesome. Look, we had a huge crowd after the backyard brawl at like 2 in the morning that night. It was great. And we'll do it again this Saturday night right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You want to make sure you know when we go live? Click the subscribe button, turn on your notifications from YouTube, turn on the notifications from this YouTube channel, and you will get an alert sent to your phone. And you'll always know when we go live for either the Panther-Lair Show on Wednesday nights or the Panther-Lair post game after the games. Of course, the fun of doing these live shows, I really enjoy the morning Pit. It's been a lot of fun to do, coming up with different things to talk about each day, kind of centering the thoughts around different topics, and really kind of, I don't know, it helps solidify some of the narratives for me of like, what are the storylines with this team? Well, when we're talking about it every day, it helps just kind of put it all together. And I enjoy doing those shows. But the real fun of these Wednesday night shows and the real fun of the post-game show is right over there. Where is it? Over on this side of the screen? The chat screen. The chat right there. And you can post your comments and your questions in the chat. and we'll respond to your comments, and we'll answer your questions. And if you want to make sure that your comment gets answered, your question gets answered, you can always be a super chatter right down at the bottom there. You click that $sign, throw a couple bucks to the podcast. We certainly appreciate that, and we will make sure we get to your comment and your question. And I want to start off here. Obviously talking about football. Football is the big topic. We'll get into some basketball stuff too. I see our guy Anthony Tennyson has a question right off the bat about hoops, and I certainly talked a lot about that on the morning Pitt today. Had an article about Jeff Capel and his new approach to the team this year, and we'll get into all of that. I think there's a lot to talk about on the basketball front. But football wise, it's an interesting point right here, because it's a third of the way into the season, but more importantly, you have this sort of separation between the non-conference and conference play. And it just so happens, the first game of the conference schedule is October 1st. So, you've got this break between September and October and November, where this first third of the season is all enclosed in September. They're all non-conference games. And then you hit October 1st and boom, you're in the final 2/3 of the season. You're in the ACC schedule. You have 8 games in a row of just conference games, just the games that matter, just the games that are going to determine whether or not you go back to Charlotte in the first weekend of December. And it's cool to have that sort of before and after moment. And, we could spend time looking back at what September meant, but I think it puts us in an interesting position to sit back and say, all right, what's going to happen the rest of the way? Some of these other seasons, 2018, 2019, 2017, when they had ACC game, and 2016 also for that matter. I forget if they played one in 15, but they had ACC games in September all those years, 16, 17, 18, 19. They had ACC games in September. So you get to October and your record, you might be 3-1 and 1-0, or 2-2 and 1-1, or 0-1, or whatever it is. You already would have kind of broken the seal on ACC games, and then you got 8 more games left to play, but one of them's Notre Dame, or one of them's Central Florida, or maybe Central Florida and Notre Dame. There's not as much of a clean break as there is right now. And with this clean break, with this sort of situation, the way it's set up here, where you play all these non-conference games in September, and then it's just, mainline ACC games the rest of the way, it allows you, I think, as you approach the end of the month here, before you get to Saturday's game, to kind of look back at September and say, all right, what did we learn here? What do we learn about this team? What do we think about this team? Who is this team? How good is this team? And maybe more importantly, and this is probably one of the most relevant questions, and I've wrestled with both of these. I've wrestled with the question of how good is this team? But then also that other question that sort of goes hand in hand with it of how good do they need to be? And I don't have an answer to either one of those. I might have more of an answer to the second one than I do to the first one at this point right now. I have ideas about how good this team is. I have thoughts about how good this team can be. And I have other ideas about how good this team needs to be. Because when I look at Georgia Tech, Virginia, Duke, I say I don't know how good you need to beat those teams. And I look at Syracuse, Louisville, North Carolina, Miami, and I say, I'm really not sure how good you need to beat those teams. All right, no matter what they've done to this point, and Syracuse put together a 4-0 record, great for them. And they play Wagner this weekend. They're going to get to 5-0. That's going to be awesome. Congratulations to the Orange. You're going to be ranked probably after you get to 5-0. How could they keep a 5-0 team out of the polls? But I still don't really know how good you are, Syracuse, and I don't know how good Pitt needs to beat you at home. North Carolina, maybe I should put North Carolina in that first group of teams that I would say, I really don't think you need to be all that good to beat them. But, they've got a potent offense, and that game is at Chapel Hill. Pitt has never won a game against North Carolina on the road. They beat them in a neutral field in the Car Care Bowl or whatever that was after the 2009 season, but they've never beat North Carolina in a true road game, ever. I think they're 0-6. And then that game at Miami at the end of the year, it's pretty easy to dump on Miami right now with what happened to them last weekend. Losing to Middle Tennessee State at home by 2 touchdowns, benching their quarterback. It's a disaster on disaster on disaster. But that game is a long way from now. Miami could have things figured out. They could absolutely, totally collapse by then too. And I'm not really sure that it matters if Miami figures it out or totally collapses between now and the end of the regular season. Because the reality is, Pitt beat Miami in Miami, on the road in 2014. That was the last time they won a game at Miami, 2014. The last time before that Pitt beat Miami at Miami, November 1963. 8 days after JFK was assassinated, bro. 1963. That's like 59 years ago? Was the last time prior to 2014. So their last win there was 8 years ago. And their last win prior to that was 59 years ago. Even if Miami is down, even if Miami collapses, even if Miami is just a complete and utter disaster, I'm not counting that as a win until the clock hits 0. Because Pitt should have won in 2019. That 2019 Miami team was not good. And they only made a bowl game because they beat Pitt. That 2018 Miami team was not good. And we saw what happened in that game. All right, Pitt has lost to plenty of Miami teams in disarray. 2014 was really the only time they got over on a Miami team that was in disarray on the road. And so they got to go there to finish the regular season. You would like to think, and it would be the best case scenario for Pitt to walk into that game with the Coastal Division already locked up. It would be better to avoid having to play that game with the Coastal Division on the line. Now, if you get to a point where the Coastal Division is locked up by the time you walk into Coral Gables, you might have some bigger things on the table, some bigger things that you're going to be playing for, in which case there's a whole new level of pressure on that game for a team that, maybe they didn't play at that time, but the fan base certainly remembers 2017 when a loss to your 4-7 team on the road ended up being the start of their downfall, for the next few years. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. The question is, in 2 parts. How good is this team, this Pitt team, and how good do they need to be? And I asked on Twitter, I put up a poll question yesterday or the day before. I lose track of my days. Yesterday, it was last night. And I put up a poll question, and I said, pretty simple. In the next 8 games, Pitt will go, and the 4 options, 5-3, 6-2, 7-1, 8-0. Got like 1,600 votes, right? So that's a decent sample size of people. Out of those 1,600 votes, 72.1% said either 7-1 or 8-0. 7-1 was the most popular choice. 40% out of those 1,600 votes said 7-1. Another 32.1% said 8-0. 23.7% said 6-2, and then 4.2% of the people said 5-3. So that is interesting. I mean, you don't want to read too much into Twitter, but this is the 1,600 people, probably including at least a few West Virginia and Penn State trolls voting on 5-3. But it's an interesting representation of where the expectations might be. When I tweeted about this show tonight, when I tweeted on the message board about it, and I said, this is what we're going to be talking about, got some replies in the message board thread. And I said, it was basically, what are your expectations for the rest of the season? And that was what we would be talking about tonight. And PJH SunJ1325 said, I'm so torn. I think we should finish 11-1. The line is playing better. The running game is strong. We've seen Keaton have success, and I think he's capable of being both a game manager and a guy who can win you a football game. The defense should have tons of success with the veteran secondary and a defensive line that is getting healthier, hopefully. However, I think we are destined for 9-3. I'm still reading from his post. I don't know why, but North Carolina's offense scares me, and Miami feels like our boogeyman until proven otherwise. The good news is Carolina looked truly awful against a pretty bad Notre Dame team, and Miami is still Miami. They're losing badly, and the team looks like it may turn on itself long before the Pitt game. Other than those 2 and maybe Syracuse, I don't know. I feel pretty good about how the schedule lines up, but the late season road trips are always dangerous. So that was one reply, and I think it sums up a lot of what we're talking about here, just the uncertainty. Because through 4 games, we've seen this Pitt team do a lot of different things. If you watched the Morning Pitt earlier this week, I forget, Monday I think it was, I asked the question, so what is Pitt's offensive identity? And a few hours after that video was released, I went to the South Side for Pat Narduzzi's weekly press conference, and I asked Pat Narduzzi, what is Pitt's offensive identity? And I didn't ask it exactly like that. It was more along the lines of, given the quarterback situation, do you feel like you've found your offensive identity yet? And that's been the biggest hang up to sort of identifying what this offense is, what they do well, what they want to be, what the basis of the offense is, and what the foundation is. The biggest problem is, they come out in the first half against West Virginia, trying to figure out what they want to do, putting Keaton Slovis under center a lot, middling results, right? It was 10-10 at halftime. Second half goes a lot better. They score 3 touchdowns. Keaton Slovis is in the shotgun more. He's throwing a little bit more. It just, the offense seems to work a little bit better. And they come out against Tennessee in the first half. And Keaton Slovis, not great numbers. I forget what he was, 12 of 27 or 24 or something like that. I think he had 24 attempts in the first half against Tennessee. And generally played pretty well. There was the interception in the end zone, but that was a case where Keaton Slovis saw the flag thrown, and decided to take a shot and made a pretty nice throw that bounced off Bub Means' hands and ended up getting intercepted. Flag got picked up, and that was a huge swing for Pitt in that game. And so, what I've contended, and if you watched the Morning Pit earlier this week, I said the same thing. Maybe that second half of West Virginia, first half of Tennessee was really kind of a glimpse of what this offense can be when it's sort of operating at or as close to full strength as possible. And then you get in the second half of Tennessee. Obviously, you have Nick Patty, and Nick Patty gets hurt, and so he's limited in what he's able to do. The offense changes again there at halftime. They go from a lot of shotgun with Keaton Slovis in the first half to a lot more under center with Nick Patty in the second half. The Western Michigan game, I mean, you throw it out. In terms of trying to ascertain what this offense wants to do and how good they can be at it, I think you throw out the Western Michigan game, other than to say Western Michigan knew they were going to run, knew that was all they were going to do, and they were still able to do it. Izzy Abanikanda was able to get his, and then some. And then the Rhode Island game, it was, they weren't taking a lot of chances. They weren't really attacking deep. They said Rhode Island took away the deep stuff, but I mean, come on. You're Pitt, you're a Power 5 conference champion. If the FCS team wants to take away the deep stuff, you should be able to still get the deep stuff. But it's fine. They didn't do it. They didn't try to do it. And so we wonder about the identity of this team. And I've said I'm not even sure how much we're going to see this week, given what Georgia Tech has given up in the run game the last 2 games. 600 yards on the ground to Ole Miss and UCF. So this could end up being another game where it's just run with only, minimal involvement from the passing game and minimal attacking from the passing game. But at some point, we're going to have to find out what this offense is. And at some point, we're going to have to find out who this offense is and what they do well and where they're able to excel and where they're able to really attack. Because I think it's just been such a mixed bag so far. It's inconclusive. It's inconclusive, and that makes a lot of our sort of conclusions about, oh, that's a terrible way to say that. That makes a lot of our sort of judgments of Pitt and opinions about Pitt inconclusive, because we just don't know. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they are. Defense is still going to give up some big plays. Can they offset that with a consistent and effective pass rush? They've done it sometimes. Offense has gotten good at getting rid of the ball quickly, seeing the blitz coming, or knowing, even if they don't know where the blitz is coming from, knowing when Pitt is going to blitz and being sort of prepared for it. If you read on Panther-Lair.com, it's actually, you can see the image up there, Pitt's defense against Rhode Island, the film review that we did with our guy Josh Hammock. Interesting stuff about not necessarily just the Rhode Island game, although there were examples there, but about how the opponents have used sort of hot coverages or hot reads in the face of the blitz, and how that Pitt has been taken advantage of in those situations. Maybe that's some of the youth, particularly at outside linebacker, some miscommunications or some things that just need to be ironed out, but that the defense is not handling hot reads well, or not accounting for them well. And so those passes are getting made. So I thought that was interesting too, because it's something that we don't really talk about that as much. We talk about, the D-line's not getting there, the linebackers aren't covering well, this or that. Maybe it's, teams know that Pitt's going to bring pressure. Teams know that Pitt's going to get after the quarterback. That's what Pitt does. That's what they've been really good at, and I think they'll be good at it again this year. But teams have found new ways to kind of respond to that, react to that, account for that, and Pitt's going to have to come up with a counter attack for the counter attack, so to speak. And so we could go round and round and round about how good this offense might be, or where this defensive vulnerabilities might be, or what they could do here, or what they can do there. But then we come back to that other question of the rest of the schedule. It's not daunting. And if you were to line up, take Pitt out of the equation, if you look at the other 13 teams in the ACC and line them up in order of best to worst, I don't know if you have a Coastal team in the top 5 right now. You have Clemson, you have NC State, Florida State, Wake Forest, Syracuse. I think at least at this point, and until proven otherwise, you put Syracuse in that group, even if you don't believe in them, and I don't. But you're looking at 4 out of the 4 or 5 Atlantic Division teams are probably in that top group of teams in the conference right now. And you only have to play Syracuse out of that group in the regular season. You only have to play Syracuse out of that group. I don't think Louisville is in that top 5. I think they're one of the bottom teams in the Atlantic right now, along with Boston College. And you have to play them, and you have to play Syracuse, but you don't have to play Clemson. You don't have to play NC State or Wake Forest or Florida State. Maybe if all goes well, you'll face one of those 2 teams, one of those 4 teams in Charlotte, but you don't have to play them in the regular season. You get Georgia Tech. You get Virginia Tech. You get Virginia. You get Duke. You get Carolina and Louisville and Syracuse and Miami. How good are they? How good do they need to be? And we don't have the answers to that yet. And you know what? It's going to be very possible that a week from tonight, we could sit here and have a very similar conversation. Quite frankly, to be honest, we should sit here and have a similar conversation. If all goes according to plan, all goes the way it should go, Pitt should go to Acrisure Stadium on Saturday night, run the ball down Georgia Tech's throat, make a couple plays in the passing game, and win fairly comfortably. Covering 23.5, I don't know. Good teams winning, great teams cover. I think Pitt's a good team. I don't know if they're a great team yet. And then we should turn around and come back here on Wednesday night and say, well, they did what they should against Georgia Tech. They're 4-1. They're 1-0 in the ACC. Let's see what happens next. That's where we should be next week. And until this team just keeps stacking wins until we say, you know what? I don't know if they're good or not, but they're playing really well. And they look like they are the best team in the Coastal, which is where they should be able to position themselves. They should put themselves in that spot. By the end of October. When we're sitting here at the end of October, we should be talking about Pitt being the best team in the Coastal and, how they can finish out in November and play their way into Charlotte and potentially where they are in the rankings and all of those questions. The opportunity's there. They're number 24 in the AP poll right now, 24 in the coaches poll. The opportunity's there to climb and climb and climb and be in the college football playoff rankings when those come out, whenever it is, mid to late October. Or November, when I forget what the date. We're so used to not needing to pay attention to that kind of thing that we are going to need to. I think we will need to know about it this year, and it should be relevant because the Coastal hasn't shown itself to be very strong. So who knows? We'll find out. So get in the chat screen there. I'm gonna flip over to the chat here, see what people are talking about. Get in here with your comments and your questions. And let me know what you think about the expectations for the rest of the season. Listen, we've been telling you for the last few weeks about our friend Chris Gates. If you don't know him, you should know him. He's a big Pitt fan. He's on Twitter. I think Chris_Gates is his Twitter. I apologize, Chris, if I messed that up. But just search for Chris Gates on Twitter. You'll find him. He's a huge Pitt fan, goes to the games. He went to Western Michigan and all that kind of stuff. But he's also an online fitness coach from Pittsburgh. I don't know if you knew that about him. Well, if you've been watching these shows for the past few weeks, you do. Chris is an online fitness coach, and he works with people all over the world to build muscle and burn fat and just improve their health through fitness and nutrition. And one of the best things I think that's happened over the past, decade or so is a move toward fitness, a move toward health. Less about weight loss or getting swole or anything. It's about being healthy. It's about fitness and all those other things sort of come along with it. And I think that's Chris's goal. Like I say, he works to help you build muscle and burn fat and improve your health, but doing it all through your fitness and your nutrition, because those are the things to dial in to be healthy. And in what Chris does, he guides and supports his clients every step of the way. So you can just show up, you put in the work, and you have confidence that what you're doing is working. So if you go to his website, chrisgatesfitness.com, you can look into what he offers as far as online coaching. And actually, if you mention Panther-Lair, when you apply, you'll get 75% off your first month of coaching. I mean, who gives a 75% discount? Chris, you might want to check and make sure that you typed that right. That's not a typo. 75% off just for mentioning Panther-Lair. And you try your first month, and I think you'll find that Chris is a great coach who's going to help you achieve your goals. Here's the other awesome thing that Chris is doing. All right, he knows how tough it is to eat right and try to be a little bit healthy at a football game, right? And tailgating. Chris put together a tailgate cookbook, all right? Like a healthy tailgate cookbook. And I've seen some of the things that he's talked about. He's tweeted about them, and it's not like crappy food. It looks really, really good, and it's healthy to have at the tailgate, and it's free, okay? Next week for homecoming, he's going to send the free tailgate cookbook to his mailing list. It's got low calorie and high protein options that you can grill up in parking lots outside Acrisure Stadium, outside the AC. How awesome is that? ChrisGatesFitness.com. Go look into his coaching. Mention Panther-Lair when you apply for coaching. Get 75% off your first month and sign up on his mailing list. He'll send you just information and research that he's done. He's a really smart guy. He's got a great service that he's doing there. So go check it out. Chris Gates, Gates, Chris, CHRIS, ChrisGatesFitness.com. Thanks, Chris, for supporting the podcast and hanging out with us here. He always he watches the live stream and things like that. So he's definitely into it. But he's a big fan of Pitt. You should check him out. ChrisGatesFitness.com. All right, in the chat section, we're talking about football, but also basketball, since Pitt basketball started their official practices this week. And Anthony Tennyson says, "Good evening, Chris. I enjoyed the morning conversation that you had about Pitt basketball, but I guess now it's time to talk football. I think they should win this game fairly easily, in my opinion." I'm never going to say that they should win a conference game easily, but they're favored by 3 touchdowns. Georgia Tech is a mess after firing their coach earlier this week. They weren't very good when they had Jeff Collins this year at 1-3, and now they're even in more disarray after changing coaches. Maybe things kind of solidify a little bit. Maybe coaches, maybe the new coach, the interim coach, is able to kind of pull the team together and they rally over these final 8 games, but it's hard to imagine that happening this weekend, and it's hard to imagine their run defense all of a sudden getting a lot better than it was over the last 2 weeks when Ole Miss ran for like 316 and UCF ran for like 284 against them. Pitt should be able to get their running game going. I think they're going to attempt to, and I think they should have success. Garrett Sherwin says, "Chris, if you had to guess, what do you see the starting 5 looking like this year for Pitt basketball?" So I think you have 2 guarantees. All right. I think the 2 guarantees are Nelly Cummings and John Hughley. For the other 3 spots, if I had to guess right now, even though they brought in all these veteran guards, I would guess Dior Johnson starts. I think he might be too talented to keep on the bench. I would think Jamarius Burton is almost a lock to have a starting spot. And then for the 4, probably like Blake Hinson, the transfer they brought in from Ole Miss, who was kind of at Iowa State but never played there and really hasn't played basketball in 2 years or played in a game in 2 years. But I think Cummings, probably Burton, and definitely Hughley are going to be guarantees to start. And then you fill out your other 2 spots. I think Dior Johnson might do it, and if he doesn't, then probably Greg Elliott. I think Nike Subandi works off the bench, even though he's cleared and he's kind of working back up after suffering his injury last year. I think he serves as a bench guy. So it could be Cummings, Greg Elliott, and Burton along with Hinson and Hughley. But I think there are different pieces you could go with to get different looks. Elliott obviously being the shooter, Dior Johnson being more of like a downhill driver, a guy who's going to get to the basket, get into the lane, and draw contact and dish and that kind of thing. So it's tough. I think I don't even know if the coaches have a set idea just yet since they just started practice this week. I think they're going to be willing to look at a number of combinations and try a lot of different guys out there. Royce Beacom says, "Are Nate Temple, Rashad Battle, and Dayon Hayes the only players identified with season-ending injuries so far? Has Dayon Hayes burnt his red shirt yet? What about Haba Baldonado?" Nate Temple and Rashad Battle are definitely out for the season. Dayon Hayes is not officially out for the season yet. I don't think that, between what Pat Narduzzi said, where he said Dayon Hayes is not out for the season, Where he also named Nate Temple and Rashad Battle as being out for the season, and not Dayon Hayes. And then also just some people I've talked to. I think there's a pretty decent chance that Hayes can and will return before the end of the season. And he's going to be out for a little while with the injury, but he's not out for the season just yet. He has not burnt his red shirt. He's a true junior this year. He played in, 2 games, I think? He didn't go to Western Michigan, so he just played in the first 2 games. So in theory, if he doesn't play again this year, or if he only plays in 2 more games this year, he could take a red shirt and be a red shirt junior next season. But we'll see. I mean, that's pretty far down the road. Haba Baldonado got hurt in the Western Michigan game, didn't play against Rhode Island. I'm of the opinion that he probably, just from different things I've heard, he probably could have played against Rhode Island, and I think he'll be ready to go for Georgia Tech on Saturday night. Ed Mahoney says, where is it? Ed's comment says, I'm pumped for Saturday night. The beer in the fridge is being chilled. The pizza will be ordered for home delivery and ready for a 17-point victory. Life is good. Well, we'll see. I guess you're not going to the game, Ed. Come on, man. Get off the couch and get to the get to Acrisure Stadium, right? Anthony Tennyson says, I think Keaton Slovis should have a big game, and I hope they can start implementing Jalen Barden into the game plan. I don't know. I don't know what's up with Jalen Barden. I didn't get a chance to ask Taekwon Underwood that when we talked to him on Tuesday. Probably will ask Pat Narduzzi tomorrow, just because after the West Virginia game, the Monday after the West Virginia game, at his weekly press conference, Pat Narduzzi said, we have to get Jalen Barden more involved. And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. Jalen Barden, he's a game breaker. He's a playmaker. They do need to get him more involved, and they should. And then they didn't. they didn't get him more involved, and it didn't make any sense. And it hasn't made any sense. I think he's a guy who could help this receiving core. I think he can make plays for them. And he hasn't. He has not been involved. And I don't understand it. Keaton Slovis should potentially have a big game on Saturday night. Let me look at the weather as it stands here on Wednesday night. Saturday, there's a 50% chance of rain on Saturday. So, potentially weather could be a factor. But again, if Georgia Tech is susceptible to the run, then I think Pitt's going to try and run it. I think there is some value in taking what the defense gives you. There is something to be said for, you don't need to get cute. If something works, go with it. And so if they go into this game and they're able to run the ball and it works, go with it. Why diverge from something that's effective? Particularly when it's running the ball and, eating the clock and all that kind of thing. So I think Keaton Slovis should be able to have a solid game, a good game, but I also think they should be able to run the ball. So we'll see. The Panther Room says this should be a great game for Pitt to figure out who they are. So you would think so. You definitely like to come out in the first ACC game of the season and light it up and really just kind of dominate the game and excel in all facets and all of that. But I still, like I said, just now to Tony Tennyson, if you can run the ball well here and you don't need to air it out, then that's what you do. If you can have that kind of game plan, maybe not as extreme as the Western Michigan game with 50 runs and 12 passes, maybe not quite as extreme, but, somewhat imbalanced toward the run, and you're able to win and it's effective, then you keep doing it. You do what and it doesn't necessarily mean that you are just so dedicated to running the ball. It means you're dedicated to doing what wins games. And if running the ball wins this game, then you run the ball. Pitt 13-9 says should be an easy win. Disappointing about the 8 o'clock time. Geez Louise. Yeah, 8 o'clock is a really late start. I'm not looking forward to that. It's going to be a really late night at Acrisure Stadium. I am all for a quick game. This Rhode Island game was 3 hours and 1 minute. I will take that on Saturday night, but I don't know if that's going to happen. BMX says, #Frank, please make in-game adjustments. The only thing I know is that Frank Signetti refused to make an in-game adjustment and bring a blocker in for the quarterback during the Tennessee game, which lost your quarterback in the game. Jeez Louise. Everybody's saying geez Louise tonight. In-game adjustments. I think we always talk about in-game adjustments. First of all, I don't know if any of us are smart enough to tell. We can only see sort of very basic, superficial things, like when they go from the West Virginia game, the first half all under center, second half all shotgun. So that's a very superficial thing that we can see from the press box and see from the stands, and it sure does look like it sure did look like an adjustment. And when they changed quarterbacks in the Tennessee game because Slovis got hurt, it sure did look like an adjustment, an in-game adjustment. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I think Frank Cignetti has called a pretty good offense thus far through 4 games, given what he's had to work with. I think when he saw how the first half against West Virginia went and how Keaton Slovis was working and that sort of the way they were, trying to go formationally, particularly being under center, and he saw how that was going for Slovis, he adjusted and he did things that sort of fit Slovis better. And when he had to go to Nick Patty, he tried to run an offense that fit Nick Patty. And when he had to go out to Western Michigan with the third string quarterback and Nate Yarnell, he ran the ball a lot. Yeah, they pounded the ball. That's not necessarily their preferred offensive approach every week. It's what they had to do and were able to do in that game. I'm with everybody else. I would have liked to have seen them air it out against Rhode Island. Take shots, get that deep passing game into a bit of a rhythm and see what they could do with it. But that wasn't the case. They chose to play it a little safer, play it a little more reliably, and it worked out. I mean, they won the game by 3 touchdowns. So they were pretty effective offensively in that game. And I think they probably could have done even more if they had been so inclined, but they weren't. So, I mean, I think to this point, Frank Cignetti's done a perfectly fine job. We'll see as the challenges mount, and as as you face different challenges from different opponents over the course of the season, we'll see how Pitt responds to it and how Cignetti responds to it. We'll see. We'll wait and see. Jason Martell says, where is it? I lost you there. What's surprising and kind of remarkable given their struggles, Georgia Tech had over 450 yards of offense against Central Florida and only allowed 1 offensive touchdown. Yeah, I thought there were points, even going back to the game against Clemson, and some of it was due to Clemson's offense still kind of being a mess at that point, although they seem to be figuring it out, which is bad news for the rest of the ACC. But I mean, they were competitive against Clemson. Or early on in that season opener at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think the game ended up being out of reach, but I mean, they were competitive. Their defense was playing pretty well. They weren't getting a lot going offensively, but their defense was playing pretty well. It just seems like a program that's kind of tail spinning right now. They fire their head coach and their AD on the same day after the 4th week of the season. I don't get mid-season firings, particularly in college. I don't understand it. I guess you want to get a head start on the search, but you're not going to get someone else that you're able to hire at mid-season. I mean, is Deion Sanders really going to come in at mid-season? I joked Dave Clawson, 2023 Georgia Tech head coach. You're not going to get him in the middle of October, and he's probably not going to want to be too involved in those kind of conversations anyway. He's got his own team to coach that he's trying to win games with. So unless you felt like the situation was so untenable that you just had to make a move, that you could not possibly go on one more day with this guy as your coach or that guy as your athletic director. And that's what, ultimately that's what Georgia Tech decided. And it sort of reeks of a program that's spinning sort of out of control. And so I think if Pitt is able to establish the run, for a team that just lost its head coach, the athletic director got fired, they're 1-3. The players are probably reeling. Some guys thinking about transferring, that kind of stuff. And now they're on the road, and you're running the ball down their throat. I mean, I'm not going to say they're going to quit, but I think it would be hard to keep focus and keep the energy up in that scenario. Let's see here. Super chatter Mark Thurkel says, from my wife, our third and fourth down and long defense seems to be ineffective. We blitz and they know it, and it's a completion over the middle. She wants a comment. Okay. So I kind of talked about that a little bit, with Pitt's blitzing. And it was in our film review series. So if you go look at that on the front page of Panther-Lair.com right now, we have a film review of a closer look at Pitt's defense against Rhode Island, and that broke down some stuff from the Rhode Island game. But I think it was relevant for other games this season, particularly that Delta defensive package, where they go 3 down linemen and 3 linebackers and 5 DBs. And what they've always done so well out of that, and I think they've really excelled with it in the past few years, is disguising blitzes and bringing them from all over the places. And it might look like 6 are coming and only 3 come. It might look like 4 are coming and 6 come. It might look like 5 and it might look like 4 are coming and 4 do come, but it's not the 4 that it looks like. They're all over the place. You never know who's going to come. And sometimes even when there's only 3 guys going, because of the way you disguised it, those 3 are able to get home, or somebody from those 3 is able to get home because of just how much, the tricks you played on the offensive lineman and the running back and the tight end and the quarterback. What seems to have happened this year, and this is something that Josh Hammock talked about in that article there, that film review, he talked about it with the Rhode Island game, but also connected it to earlier games this season, is that in those blitz situations, when Pitt would be blitzing out of that Delta package, other teams are ready with their hot reads. And Pitt's defense doesn't seem to be adjusting to those hot reads or accounting for those hot reads as well as they need to. And that might be on the inexperience of the outside linebackers. That could be on a different position. It could just be that Pitt hasn't been able to adjust to that yet and account for it yet and accommodate it, and like I say, sort of adjust their scheme to account for it. I think there's probably a variety of reasons why that's been effective. But, with Pat Narduzzi talking about how quickly teams have gotten the ball out against Pitt, and then you start thinking about the hot reads and then the hot coverage, you kind of see how there's been a bit of a problem, and it's probably kept their blitzes from getting home as often as they have in the past. And so I think that, Mark, if you want to tell your wife that, I think teams are, even if they don't know where the blitz is coming from, they have a pretty good sense of when the blitz is coming. Which downs they like to, obviously Pitt likes to blitz and rush the passer out of that Delta defensive package. I think even on the 4th down when Rhode Island scored a touchdown, I think Pitt was in the Delta defensive package, and I think they blitzed out of that package, and Rhode Island was prepared for it. They had the hot read set up, and they were able to make the play. So that's something I think the defensive coaches are going to have to work on. They're going to have to keep, the players are going to have to learn a little bit better. They're going to have to, keep going over those kinds of things. And then they'll have to adjust the scheme and keep practicing and improving with the experience that they're getting. So that's my best explanation. I don't know if the coaches would agree with that assessment or not, but our guy Josh Hammock, who breaks down the film for us at Panther-Lair.com, that's what he sees happening. And it makes a lot of sense. I think when you look at the way teams are completing passes against Pitt, the way, maybe their Delta defensive package hasn't been as effective at generating sacks as it was in the past, at least through the first 4 games here. This season, that all kind of tracks with what he's talking about as far as the hot reads and the hot coverage not necessarily being what it needs to be so far to this point. Let's see here. The Panther Room says, I accepted the fact today that Pitt is going to ride Israel Banacana to the Izzy to the Hizzy / ACC championship or die. LOL. They are. But I think they are also capable of and willing to, I think they're willing to throw, and I think they're capable of throwing. I still believe in the potential of this wide receiver core, even though I don't think they've shown it consistently enough, over the course of the 4 games. And some of that was not having the opportunity to show it consistently. Although it's funny, the game where they threw the fewest passes, the Western Michigan game, I thought Konate Mumfield had maybe his best game. His 3 catches were all really good. His touchdown catch was really good. His other 2 catches were really good. So that makes me still believe in the potential that's there, the potential we all talked about all offseason. I still think Keaton Slovis can be really good. I really do. I think Bub Means needs to just settle in and get consistent and have an opportunity to attack in some of the unique ways that he can attack. Jared Wayne coming back into this receiving core, which I think there's a pretty good chance that he'll play this week against Georgia Tech. I think we know what he is, and you saw how good he was against Western Michigan before he got hurt. And then, potentially Jalen Barden, Jaden Bradley continues to grow. We'll see when Gavin Bartholomew is able to play again. I don't think he's definite to be out this week. I think it's a possibility he could play this week. We'll see, though, because he was on the sidelines in a sling during the Rhode Island game. So that's, probably maybe a game time decision. We'll see what it looks like before the game on Saturday night. But Carter Johnson with a big catch and run. He's been really good as a blocker. He's helped open some big holes for the running game, and then finally got a pass thrown to him, and he ends up getting a lot of yards after the catch. I think it was a 41-yard reception, and officially he had 39 yards after the catch on the play. So 2-yard pass that he turns into 40 plus. All right, let's throw the ball to that guy a little bit more. He didn't look like a speed demon running down the sideline, but he got there, and he got down the sideline pretty well. He fumbled, but still, overall, I think you'd give him a passing grade for his first career college reception, right? So, I think there are good targets in this, and then I think the backs can catch the passes and make plays too. Vincent Davis, Izzy Abanikanda, Rodney Hammond when he comes back. I'd like to see the ball thrown to Sebo Flemister, see what he can do. I think the backs can make plays as pass-catching options as well. So, there are good options in this passing game. There are reasons to think that it can work. It doesn't just have to be hand the ball to Izzy Abanikanda every play. Handing the ball to him a lot is still a good plan. He's the ACC's leading rusher and one of the top rushers in the country. So yeah, you do want to get him the ball and let him make plays. But you don't have to exclusively do that. And I think they know they don't have to exclusively do that. They just haven't done the other things because they haven't needed to. Now, you and I might feel like, well, they should do those other things. Even if they don't need to, they should do them just to get comfortable doing them, just to get into a rhythm with that part of the passing game. They've chosen not to do that so far. We'll see how that works out when they get into these ACC games, and they are going to have to throw. We'll see if they're able to get that rhythm and settle in and get comfortable with the passing game. But, yes, they're going to run the ball a lot. And when Rodney Hammond comes back, they're going to run the ball a lot. But they're also, we know they're going to need to be able to throw. And I think the coaches know they're going to need to be able to throw. And I think they're confident that they will be able to throw when that time comes. Stephen P. says, I would like to see Daniel Carter get the ball on something other than a 1-yard fullback dive. The dude is pretty athletic, and I think he can make some plays in the flat off play action. I would probably look for that to happen. I would look for play action passes to the fullback in the flat, or even up the middle if you get an opportunity to work him into the middle of the field. He was a third down machine. He's not a fourth down machine, but he was a third down machine. He converted like every third down he carried the ball. He just couldn't get that fourth down the one time. I'm all for giving Daniel Carter options, giving him opportunities. You do run into one of those situations where you're asking yourself, okay, I want to get the ball to Daniel Carter. Seems like a good idea. The guy seems to make plays. He seems to, he picked up a bunch of first downs. Seems like he has potential. I want to get the ball to Daniel Carter. It's not a bad idea, all right? But if you're handing it to Daniel Carter on first down, right, or you're throwing it to the flat, throwing it to him in the flat on first down, and your other option is handing it to Izzy Abanikanda on first down, or throwing it to Abanikanda on first down, or throwing it to Mumfield on first down. I think you look at it and say, which play is more likely to get me a win on first down? And the reality is, Abanikanda is more likely to get you a win on first down. Mumfield is probably more likely to get you a win on first down. Gavin Bartholomew is probably more likely to get you a win on first down. That doesn't mean you should ignore Daniel Carter altogether. But, we had this back when, Henry Hynoski was at Pitt. Why don't they give the ball to Hynoski? Give the ball to Hynoski. Well, do you want to give the ball to Hynoski instead of handing it to Dion Lewis or Ray Graham? Because I think there's a role for Hynoski, and there are times when he can make things happen, but the guy who's more likely to give me a win on any given down is Dion Lewis or Ray Graham. The guy right now who's more likely to give me a win on any given down is Israel Abanikanda. And so I'm not really, and when Rodney Hammond comes back too, I'm not all that inclined to take carries away from 2 and 6 so that I can give them to 4. Now, there are situations where 4 is the best option. Even situations where maybe it's not obvious. You know what I mean? Like a 3rd and 1. Maybe a 2nd and 6 or something where you do run play action and you throw a little dump off to the flat. Maybe every now and then. But for the most part, I want my carries and passes going to the guys who can get me a win or who are more likely or the most likely to get me a win on any given down. And so I like Daniel Carter. I like what he's done. He looked good in the spring, but you have to decide where you're going to put the ball to have a chance. Luke Degenhart says, I hope Izzy Abanikanda has another multi-touchdown game on the ground if it ain't broke. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. I think what it comes down to is this, Luke. This is what I would say when we talk about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's absolutely true. And I've long been a proponent of, do something until the opponent stops you. Don't stop yourself. You know what I mean? Make the opponent prove that they can stop you before you make the decision to stop. I used to get so frustrated, watching like Pitt in like 2007, 2008 when they try and do things other than give the ball to LaShawn McCoy. And I just say, like, why are you taking the ball out of McCoy's hands? They haven't stopped him yet. And, the response would be like, yeah, but I mean, we can't just hand it to him every time. They know where the ball is going. Okay, that's fine. They do. At least make them prove that they can stop you before you stop yourself. You know what I mean? Like your running game, it was the Cincinnati game in 2008. And if you remember that game, it was late in the season and there was something to play for at that point. And like Pitt's first drive, they're just marching down the field, handing the ball off to McCoy. I mean, he's just running well. Don't stop. Don't stop. And they get down to like the 30 or 35 or something, and they end up on like first down there, dropping back to pass. They take a sack. It pushes them back, 2nd and long. Now they got to throw. I don't even know if they ended up getting a field goal out of that drive. Now there was problems that went into that. It wasn't a terrible play call, but my point is, don't stop doing what works just because you think the opponent knows you're going to do what works. Make them stop you before you stop yourself. Now, the flip side of that, particularly when you're looking at the first 4 games of a season like we are right now, is, okay, that's great. Make them stop you. Don't stop yourself. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. All that stuff. At the same time, you want to be able to know that you can do the other things if they do stop you. If they do shut down your running game, you need to know that you're able to attack, through the air. And ideally, you would use at least some of the first 4 games as an opportunity to work that out and make it work and make sure you can do those things. You know what I mean? Like that's what those games are supposed to be for. And Pitt didn't really do that. Western Michigan, they didn't do it because they didn't have Keaton Slovis. They didn't have an opportunity to do it. Rhode Island, they didn't do it because they just didn't want to. And so now they're going to get into the ACC believing they can run, which they have been able to, and believing they can pass, which they haven't done all that much. Although Keaton Slovis did have 500 yards in 6 quarters. So maybe that's all the evidence they needed. Maybe that's all the proof they needed to know that they could do it. Let's see. Brock Madonic says, is it crazy to say Pitt should be able to win out if they can stay healthy? Also, I see the Twins playing vital roles this upcoming season. Yeah, going football and basketball here. Is it crazy to say Pitt should be able to win out? No, I don't think it's crazy, just because of what we've talked about with the level of competition in the Coastal Division right now and the level of competition on Pitt's schedule right now. It's not crazy to say they potentially could go 8-0. To say they should, look, what I've always said is it's really, really hard to win that many games in a row, right? And if they were to go 8-0 during this stretch, and I'm not saying that I'm predicting that for them, but if they were to go 8-0 in this stretch, that would mean a 10-game winning streak heading into the offseason, or heading into the postseason. It's really, really hard to win 10 games in a row. It's really, really hard to do it. Most teams are unable to do it. I mean, you have to be the best of the best, to put together that kind of season where you can play 10 games in a row without making the kind of mistakes that'll sink you in a game. You know, it's tough to do. And as you're, if you want to assume like a Georgia or an Alabama are sort of the top of the heap in terms of talent level, as you work down from that top tier, it gets more and more difficult to string that many wins together because you don't have the talent to sort of overcome those mistakes and errors that will ultimately cost you a game. And so it becomes more and more difficult. And you get to the tier that Pitt is in with a lot of other schools, probably the majority of other Power 5 schools. I think the difficulty is significantly high to go 10-0 like that. I said this last year after Pitt lost to Miami. Everybody's, Miami this, Miami that. Well, I said, look, to do what you're talking about, Miami would need to win like 6 in a row. And I think that would be really tough for them to do. It's hard for teams to win 6 or 7 games in a row, and I don't know what Miami's going to do. I think they lost like the next week. It's just a tough thing to do, and so you can look game by game and say, I don't see the game where I'm going to pick against Pitt out of these next 8, aside from maybe Miami at this point. But when you pull back and look at it as 8 games in a row, you say there's going to be a loss in there somewhere. There's going to be a loss in there somewhere. One of these games is going to go wrong. There's going to be a turnover at the wrong spot, like the Miami game. There's going to be something inopportune that happens, a weird fluky thing, or just a game where you just lose your focus a little bit. The Miami game, there was turnovers. There was a safety that didn't happen, or looked like it might have happened, but it didn't get called. But really, it was the first quarter. There was just a bunch of sloppy tackling. And it gave Miami like 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. If you just tackle a little cleaner, those turnovers, that safety, all that stuff doesn't matter, and Pitt probably wins the game if you just tackle a little bit, if you're just a little bit sharper in your details. And that's probably what it comes down to, is that it's hard to have there's a level of focus that you need and a level of attention to detail that you need to win, right? Like a winning level of detail and attention to detail and focus. And it's hard to maintain and operate at that level of focus and attention to detail for that many games in a row. For Pitt, like I said, that would be 10 games in a row, leading into the ACC championship game, which you would like to then think they would win, which would mean 11 games in a row, which would mean they were 11-1, 12-1 coming out of the conference championship game, potentially going to the playoffs, which means you would need to maintain at that level of detail and attention to detail and focus for another 2 games. And so you're going to go 10, 11, 13 games in a row. That's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do. And so somewhere along there's probably going to be a loss. It's just sort of inevitable, I think. It's a question of where it is, where it might go. Evan D402 jumps in as a super chatter here right at the end. Says, I've said since the beginning of the year, Pitt can win out. They can, but they just can't have a game where both sides of the ball fold. On basketball, I've always been too positive, but this is the year. I would agree with you, Evan. They need to have both sides playing at a high level pretty much all, for all 8 games, which can be tough. On the basketball side, as far as being positive, I'll say this and I'll leave it at this because I said a whole lot during the morning pit today. I would recommend you go back to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com and watch that morning pit from today where we talked about Jeff Capel's approach to this season and whether or not it can work. But I would say this about being positive about Pitt basketball this year. They haven't had a team like this. For better or for worse, they haven't had a team like this before under Jeff Capel with 4 veteran guards and John Hughley. We've seen them with different combinations of talent, different types of players, different age levels and experience levels, and all those different things. We've seen a lot of different iterations of Jeff Capel's attempts at winning basketball over the last 4 years, and they've all fallen short. Well, this year he's trying something different. He's got, 3 sixth-year seniors and 1 fifth-year senior guard. So you've got a loaded, experienced backcourt, a super talented freshman who came in, and then John Hughley ready to play as a junior and seemingly committed to nothing other than winning right now. This is a guy who wants the team to win more than anything else, maybe more than anyone else, in John Hughley. And so all I can say with Pitt basketball is, well, they haven't had a team like this. Let's see if this works. Jeff Capel's counting on it working. It was his plan for the offseason to have a team like this. we'll see how it works out. We'll see how effective it can be. It's going to be interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting. Listen, I do recommend if you want some more Pitt basketball talk, go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can click that subscribe button right down there, and that's going to get you all locked into our YouTube page at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. But look at the morning Pitt from today, Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. Will Jeff Capel's new plan work? Will his plan for this season work? A lot of Pitt basketball conversation there, like 25 minutes of it, 26 minutes or something. So highly recommend that for some Pitt basketball talk if you're looking for it. Right there at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Of course, we have a lot of Pitt basketball talk at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You can find it all at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Listen, hit the like button before you go. Hit the subscribe button before you go. Like this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really appreciate that. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's where we're trying to build something here, which I think is pretty unique in the Pitt world. So the Pitt, Pitt media coverage, whatever you want to call it. I think we're building something pretty unique here to go with Panther-Lair.com and really like what we've been doing. So subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hit the like button. We appreciate that very much. And yeah, it's been fun. Thanks to everybody who joined the chat screen tonight. Thanks to Chris Gates for supporting us again. Go check out chrisgatesfitness.com. Like I say, we'll have another morning Pitt on Friday morning, and we'll have a live Panther-Lair post-game show at some point after the Georgia Tech game on Saturday night. Don't know what time, but it's going to be a late one, but it'll be a fun one for sure. So thanks again for tuning in. We will talk to you, did I say on Friday? I don't know what day of the week this is. This is Wednesday. So I guess we'll talk to you on Thursday morning for the morning Pitt right here